most important thing to do is you do not wait for opportunity. You create it yourself. It worked out well because I had an NBA player in Chris Boucher, and Chris Boucher is with Rock Nation. And because he's with Rock Nation...
You are now listening to the MVP podcast, where we explore the business of sports. My name is Courtney.
And I'm Jimmy.
And on this episode, we spoke to Mike Roach, who works in broadcast for the Toronto Raptors and is also the host of the Mike Roach Podcast. And this guy's been in the industry for almost a decade, so he brings a world of experience. And on this episode, we talked to him about how he broke into the industry without having any specific experience before he got in. We also talked about how he negotiated a deal with Yahoo Sports Canada that led to him starting his own show with the NBA's Chris Boucher. And then we talked about why he eventually chose to start his own independent platform where he can have creative control over his content. This was a great episode with a lot to learn, so make sure you listen up.
Yeah, absolute gems on this one. I know I say that all the time, but if you're enjoying this podcast, make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure you subscribe where you see a subscribe button and share it with a friend. Come on, let's grow together. All right, guys, without further ado, here's our conversation with Mike Roach.
We're here with Mike Roach. And Mike, you've been in the industry for a while now, a long time. You've been following the Raptors. You've been talking about the moves that they're making, and you get in on a granular level like somebody who really knows the game and knows the history of the players and the composition of the team would be able to. So how did you make it to this point where you're so close to the team and you're almost becoming somewhat of like an insider? So how did you go from wherever you started out to where you're at?
You guys want the long or short version?
Want the long version.
So
we gotta
start by telling us where you are, and then go in and just tell us the story of how you got there.
Okay, so I'm a broadcast assistant for the Toronto Raptors right now, but I do my thing on the podcasting side as well. I have my own show, the Mike Roach Podcast. I have a show called Hustle Play with Chris Boucher. That was for Yahoo Sports, but Yahoo Sports Canada is now done.
Defunct.
But I mean, I went to school, Sheridan College in Brampton, and as soon as I finished there, I made a lot of calls and emails, and I landed myself an internship at Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I was there for about 14 months, and I was doing radio editing pretty much. So when you're listening to The Fan and you're listening to all those clips that you hear during the commercials and that kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff that I was doing. I was putting those clips together for the commercials, and I was also reporting. But instead of because when you're an intern, really, especially at those times, I'm not sure how it is now, but they wouldn't let you go to like Leafs games and Raptors games and stuff like that. Especially because at that time there were some incidents with some of the interns, I guess, at the stadiums and stuff and whatnot. So they kind of took a break with that. So
they blew it for the rest of the interns.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. At least for that period of time,
right?
While I was there. So I was doing stuff like the Toronto Rock with lacrosse. I was going to report there, and I was doing stuff for like the PGA Tour with golf. Doing stuff and reporting there. Those just, small jobs like that. And then they would send me out there, and then I would come back, chop it up, cut it up, and do some editing at Sportsnet, and then just put it in the archives. And when they needed to use it, they used it, right? So, I mean, I was doing a lot of that stuff at Sportsnet 590 The Fan, but also building relationships at the same time, right? You build those relationships while you're there. And I mean, you pretty much just hope that good things happen.
Yeah. And so that's a huge network. Sportsnet in general, they've got the television section. I mean, underneath of Rogers in general, they're one of the two big players in Canada. So you got the television section and you got the radio section. How closely did you work with the people who are doing the TV stuff, or is it completely separate? And How did you even land that internship? Was it something coming out of school that they came to like a career fair, or was one of those emails that you sent out, was that the way that you got your foot in the door?
So pretty much the guy, what was his name again? The guy's name was Ryan Walsh, who was there. He was the producer of a show called Primetime Sports at that time. I was trying to send emails and make calls, but I wasn't getting anybody. So I called this guy literally for like 14 or 15 days straight. And I called him every day, wouldn't pick up, called him back again, left a message, didn't pick up, called back the next day, left a message, called him back, left another message, left another message, left another message for, I think, maybe 14 or 15 days straight. And then he ended up calling me back. And you know what the crazy thing is? I'll give you this because I actually want people to learn something, right? I remember when I was in my house trying to get this internship. This is, I think, maybe a couple days after I graduated from Sheridan. And I ended up graduating. I did an extra semester. So I ended up graduating, I think, in like December or something like that, after exams. And I was making all these calls, and it wasn't getting anywhere, right? You're calling somebody for weeks and you don't hear anything back. I remember being in the house. I was by myself in the house. And I was so mad. Like, you know, when you're trying to be great at something or do something or accomplish something and nothing's happening, or it feels like nothing's happening. I remember yelling at the top of my lungs, man, just me in the house right now. I swear to you. I remember yelling at the top of my lungs, God, if you really want me to do this, and I feel like you want me to do this, then why the hell am I doing these things and absolutely nothing is happening? And I think maybe 2 minutes later, the phone rang and it was Ryan Walsh.
Stop it.
I swear to you. It was Ryan Walsh, and he told me to come in for an interview to be an intern at Sportsnet, 590 The Fan.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, when he called me in for that interview, because remember, I told you this was in December, right? He calls me into this interview, and the interview is during the middle of a Christmas party. So I'm getting in there now, and I'm in the middle of this Christmas party, in the middle of a studio at Sportsnet. In the studio, the place is packed. There's music going on. The people are drinking wine and they have beers. Everything's going on in there. And he's interviewing me, but because he's in the middle of a Christmas party, it's almost like he was just like, yeah, you got it. Let me just go back to this Christmas party here, pretty much. So everything worked out perfectly. And I ended up getting the internship.
That's pretty cool. But man, what a story of not taking no for an answer. And I feel like that's what we've heard from a lot of people in the sports industry, and really what I've seen from watching other people in real life is the people who do the best in this industry are just the ones who work the hardest. Obviously, everybody's got to be smart, but it's competitive. There's only so many jobs available because there's only so many franchises. There's only so many media outlets. So you really have to show that you want it to a different degree. So you get this internship, you're there for 14 months. And then where do you go from there? And what's the next step?
So I'm there for 14 months. I go into Sportsnet one night. They come to me, and they go, Mike, come here for a second. So I go and say, tonight's going to be your last night here as an intern. You've done well. You've been here for a little while now. I'm proud of what you're done. After tonight, you're done. Right? So, okay. So I'm thinking the whole way home now, what am I going to do here now? So I go home, go to bed, get up the next morning. And when I was at Sportsnet, they want you to try to practice being a producer, even while you're editing and all that kind of stuff. They throw you into different roles to see how you do, right? they give you what's called a blue book. At least that's what it was when I was there. In that blue book, you have a whole bunch of names and phone numbers for people all over the industry, NHL, NFL, NBA, anything. I mean, you're trying to reach certain people at TNT. You're trying to reach certain people at ESPN. You're trying to reach somebody here, there. You open that book, there's phone numbers, there's names, all that stuff, right? One of the names that I saw, because I always wanted to do something with basketball, and for the Raptors, is a guy by the name of Dan Gladman, who used to be the TV producer for the Toronto Raptors. He did for, I think, about close to 20 years. But anyway, he was one of the people that I reached out to. I reached out to a bunch of people, never heard back from a bunch of people, but I reached out to him and I heard back from him. He tells me, I send him an email and he sends me back an email. He says, you know what, Mike? Sound like a pretty smart kid. Sound like you know your stuff, especially when it comes to this NBA stuff. I'll meet me at the NBA TV Canada studios and we'll have a chat. I go there, meet him, talk to him for maybe, I don't know, half an hour. He goes, you know what? I like you, Mike. You seem like you know what you're talking about here. You seem like, and before he told me to come, he told me to put some stuff together, like some kind of documents with the NBA. I can't remember what it was about, but he's like, I want you to make this document for me regarding the NBA and this and this and that. So I brought it. He saw it. He liked it. He goes, I'm going to try you out as a broadcast assistant, and we'll just see how it goes, right? Like, I don't know if you'll get to keep the job, but we'll try you for maybe a week or so, and we'll just see how it goes. Because I didn't go to school for broadcasting. I went to school for business marketing.
Mm.
I didn't do anything in sports. My plan was to do something in business. And then I played basketball throughout high school. I coached for 12 years. So I had a bit of a sports background, and I wanted to merge it with the business and then see what I could make out of that. Right. Yeah. So when I first went in to start the behind the scenes stuff in the broadcasting, was the first year when DeRozan and Lowry got into that playoff series against Brooklyn in 2014, that playoff series. And then I started, I did pretty well, and I just kind of continued from there.
Wow. So what is the role of a broadcast assistant?
Oh man, it's like you're doing all the stuff pretty much that the broadcasters can't do. If they're on air, they need tea, coffees, waters, anything like that, I'll get it for them. I'm running stats to the producers, directors in the truck, to the on-air talents that you guys see. For example, you'll see people like Kate Burness, you'll see Leo Routens, all that kind of stuff. I'll be running stats to them. If there's anything I have to do, you might see other people on air like the Kayla Grays, the Savannah Hamiltons, anything that they need me to do for them. During the game, I will help and assist them with doing anything that they need to be done. Also, any props that have to be on air. Because remember, once that game starts, the producers and the directors can't move. They're locked into the broadcast truck. They're doing everything on air. And the broadcasters can't move either. So if anything has to be ran, stats, papers, props, anything that has to be on air, if I have to be with a guest who's going to be going on air and take him from one side of the building, show him how to get to another place in the building, it's all the miscellaneous stuff that the other people can't do. That's where I step in and I have to do it.
Yeah, you're like the hand. You're like
pretty much
the invisible hand that actually is pulling strings. That's cool,
pretty
man.
much. Yeah.
And so I call myself diehard Raptors fan. Out of 82 games, I'll probably watch 70 games a season. whether live or if I PVR them. So all the names you're saying are familiar to me, but, going from an intern where you were there for quite a while to get a little bit familiar with some of the people who were on the back of house, behind the camera type of thing, behind the mic. What was it like when you started getting around people who were on screen, and like, how do you carry yourself as somebody who was new and somebody who was still learning, but you're around savvy veteran people, or you're around, people who might have a little bit of clout and things of that nature? How do you handle yourself as when you're first starting out and you're just breaking in?
Well, it was surreal, man. Like when I first started, I remember one of the first days I was there and I saw Sherman Hamilton, and and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, Sherman Hamilton. But the funny thing is that I knew Sherman already a little bit because he used to coach me from time to time in high school when I played in high school. But, it's so surreal, man. Like when you watch an NBA team and a team like the Raptors for so long, and then you're in the building and you're on the court, and you're now around and working with all these people, you're just like, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe this. You know what I mean? And then not only that, but every day and every time you work and you're in that arena, you really don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know who you're going to see. Every day is a different experience, right? So, I mean, it's amazing, man. Like there's so many people that you come across, so many people that you meet. It's hard to put it into words sometimes when I actually think back and from where I started until now. But, because the hunger was just there to be good at what I'm doing. Always professional when I was there because I had that kind of mindset already. I remember like when I first got there, a lot of people who are working dress casually, right? But when I first got there, I was in dress shoes, dress shirt. I was like buttoned up, tie, everything. And so many people were like, man, you're like way overdressed for this, dude. Like, take it easy, man. Calm down. What are you doing here? And I went to my boss, who was a producer. And he was like, I went to him, I'm like, I think I'm a bit overdressed, man. People tell me I'm looking way too good here. And then I'll never forget, the producer goes, Dan Gladman, the same guy I was telling you about. He was like, Mike, come on, man. You could never overdress. You either look good or you don't. Whoa. Like one or the other, right? So I always kept that in my mind, right? And he always let me know that for you to accomplish something, 50% of it is just being there. Just if you want to get something done, right? You want to meet someone, you want to sell yourself, 50% of accomplishing that is just being where you're supposed to be. Even if you don't talk to anyone, you don't do anything, by you just being where you're supposed to be, if you put yourself in the right spot, something could happen from that. You know what I mean? So just getting myself in that right position to be in the building, making sure I handle myself in a professional manner, it's helped me, branch off into different avenues and get things to kind of work for myself, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And you definitely did branch out. Looking over your shoulder, I see the branding. I mean, you said you went to school for business and marketing, and the branding of the Mike Roach podcast, so clean. I see it over the shoulder there.
Appreciate it.
And then I'm also surprised that you said you didn't go to school for broadcast or journalism or any of those things, because now you're like a seasoned, podcaster, broadcast person, content production at a high quality. You've done stuff with Yahoo Canada, like you mentioned. So was it when you were doing your internship that you started to hone those skills with the video editing and with all of the other things that you needed to be able to put together the podcast and those types of things? Or how did you go from, being a broadcast assistant, and then where did the opportunity for you to even collab with a guy like Chris Boucher, like where is that born, and how does that enter the story?
No, it's a good question. It's a good question. So when I was at Sportsnet, I did get some studio time, because when you're an intern there, like you can book maybe an hour of studio time to go in there and like record a podcast or something, right? So that's what I started doing. But for the longest time, I didn't really act on it because I was torn between, I wanted to be a front office guy and I wanted to be a scout. That's originally what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a scout. And I told myself, all right, I kind of got to choose one. Like, you can't be scouting and in the front office and doing podcasts and media shows at the same time. It's either you're going to do this or you're going to do that, right? So I was doing podcasts and stuff like that every now and then, but I didn't want to go full-fledged into it because I still kind of had a thing for scouting and whatnot, and I was going to try and pursue that. But over time, I felt like podcasting and doing shows was more suited for me. And I still, at that same time, was doing scouting reports for executives as well, in the background too, right? So I figured one day I kind of sat myself down and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go into the podcasting and the shows and stuff full time and go that avenue. And if I want to do any scouting reports and all that kind of stuff, I'll just do it on the side as well. But I asked myself, how can I help more people? And I felt like I could help more people by using my voice on a microphone because it can reach the masses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I figured that out, I did exactly what you guys are doing right now. I created a platform for myself.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the most important thing to do. The most important thing to do is you do not wait for opportunity. You create it yourself. You don't wait to be hired by somebody. You don't keep looking up jobs trying to, oh man, I didn't get this one. I didn't get this one. I didn't get this one. You don't do that. What you do is you get on a microphone, you hit record, and you create your own job. You create your own podcast and your own show. And then when you create your own show and you have on guests like you do now, that's when you market your ass off. You market like hell. So just like you guys are doing with a podcast, you got a guy on like myself right now. You chop it up, you get the clips out there, you throw it on YouTube, you put it on Spotify, you put it on SoundCloud, you put it wherever it has to go, but you create your own opportunity just like you guys are doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you create that opportunity, you market the hell out of it. You put it everywhere. Everywhere you can put this thing, you put it. You put it on Apple, you put it on Spotify, you put it on Google, you put it on X, you put it on Facebook, you put it on Instagram, you put it on LinkedIn, you put it on TikTok, you put it everywhere. Because that's how people are going to find out about you. It's just the way that it works. And you just have to understand that it takes time to do it.
Because he's going in right now, and I want to know a little bit more about the origin of OXP Media, because I went on your YouTube channel and I was kind of like just binge watching your content, and you've come a long way, like from when you started, especially like the branding on the Mike Roach podcast. You've definitely learned a lot. I'm interested in the origin of how you created OXP Media, your strategy around that, because there's other shows on that network. So could you take us into why you created that network and what you're doing with it now in terms of your strategy to help produce more shows?
The OXP Media, I dissolved the company. It's not around anymore.
Okay.
I think I dissolved it maybe a year, 2 years ago at this point now. But I started the company just because I wanted to have my own platform where we had a couple shows underneath there and just kind of create what we wanted to create and not have to listen to anybody else. So it was myself, my brother, close family friend, a very good friend of mine, Brandon Graham, who I used to do shows with, and one other guy as well. And, you know, it's tough to create a company like that when you're working with multiple people. But at the end of the day, the company dissolved because we kind of had different plans and we were trying to do things a bit differently. So we ended up just folding that company. And then I started a new company called New Era Podcast Productions, which is my company now. And that is what the Mike Roach Podcast is underneath that company there. But ultimately, the reason I do this and I always make sure that I have my own show is because I've been in the media space working with different companies for about a decade now. I kind of know how things work in regards to contracts and creative control and things like that when you're making your own show. And ultimately, when you have your own company and your own show, nobody can tell you what to do. Nobody can tell you what to say. That's the biggest reason for doing that, right? If I want to talk crazy, I'll talk crazy. If I want to be boring, I'll be boring, right? But one thing that I know is no matter what I say, I'm not going to fire myself, right? And it doesn't matter what the topic is, I can discuss it. Nobody can tell me what to say. Nobody can tell me what to discuss. They can't tell me in what tone I can speak about it in. I do what I want because I own this, right? It's owned and operated by me. So that is always the most important thing to me. And you guys are doing it right now. So you'll see. And you guys have been around a little bit as well. So I'm sure you guys have learned some things as well. But I mean, the marketing is a huge thing, like you guys mentioned, right? So it takes a lot of work, takes a lot of patience, takes a lot of learning over time. Like before we all just came onto this podcast, I just did a podcast, just myself. And, you know, I'm going to be going into doing a podcast a lot more with guests right now. But these last couple years, I took a step back from the guests because I told myself, if I'm ever working on radio one day or doing a show, I want to be able to hold myself to the fire. I want to be able to go on a microphone solo for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, and show to the masses that I can hold my own without anybody, without a guest, just me. And I can have my notes and I can do my thing and talk, and I can do it without anyone, right? That's what I wanted to prove to myself. That's what I wanted to prove to the people. When you can do that, because to me, I found it was like, yo, to be the best, I have to be able to do this on my own, right? With no one, just me on a microphone, talking to myself. Not sure if you guys have ever done that, but it's weird when you get on a mic and there ain't no one there but you, right? But I've learned over time that it's all about preparation. Yeah. It's all about preparation, taking your notes. Like I created, when you're a broadcast assistant for a long time, right? And sometimes I'm a stage manager. So when I'm a stage manager from every now and then, you're pretty much the eyes and the ears for the producers and directors sitting next to the guys on the court, whether it's Jack Armstrong, Matt Devlin, Alvin Williams, whoever it is. But you have a script when you're going into that game. The producers give you a script of the pregame, of what we're going to be talking about on that pregame. There's a half an hour pregame before the game starts. Everything is on there. Happens from 6 to 6:03. This is who's talking. This is what we're talking about. From 6:03 to 6:07, this is what we're talking about. From 6:07 to 6:15, this is what we're talking about. We're going to be on the perch up there with that camera talking about this. We're going to be underneath the basket with Kayla Gray talking about this. We're going to be underneath the other basket with Josh Lewinberg talking about this. You got a script, a paper here with everything on there. I just did a podcast. It was 18 minutes. This is all on there. Okay? There's a bunch of different stuff, notes that I have here, a bunch of notes I had here, sound effect stuff. If I want to use it, I'll put it on there. But when you're organized, it's different. It's a different type of show you got when you're organized. And typically, because I'm under the weather right now, like I feel better than I did a few days ago, but typically when I'm finished a podcast, I know I'm ranting now. I'm just going on here. But,
you're going in. Let's go.
When I'm finished a podcast, typically I don't edit anything. I just go from start to finish. I put the intro on, I put the ending on, and that's it. I don't go and edit this and edit that. No, I just finish the podcast and boom, I put on the intro, outro, and I'm gone. I'm done. But if you want to take your podcast to the next level, I would suggest that you really learn the ins and outs of your editing, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to make sure you take out all those dead spots. You want to be precise with everything that's going on. And when you're sick like I am right now, I had to stop. Trust me, bro. It's just because people only hear what your podcast sounds like after you finish doctoring it all up, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't hear it before. Like I'm sure a lot of people sometimes do a podcast for an hour, and by the time they take out all the mistakes and all that kind of stuff, their podcast is like 10 minutes. But trust me, it's all a part of the process, man.
Yeah.
It's all a part of the process. And even when I think about, when I'm looking at even cards I have like this,
Yeah.
I write notes on stuff like this. So I have a bunch of these sitting all over the place, stacks of them.
Those are like cue cards.
Cue cards, yeah, when I need them. And I still need these because it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this for, you can always get better. If you're studying and you're constantly listening to shows, you're always trying to get better. I put out maybe 3 or 4 podcasts a week, and I'm always trying to do something new, right? Like today I got a whole bunch of more sound clips, put them into my system that I can plug in and use them on the show. Like I mentioned, I just created this template not long ago, but I revised it and then made a better template from the old template I had to kind of break things down and organize them as I'm going through my podcast. And it's just little details, man. Like if you go back 3 years to now, for me, look at my podcast covers, my podcast art. I probably had like 10 of them.
Yeah.
Because I keep changing them to find out the right one. I might like the one I had, this last week. The next week, I'm trying to make a better one. It's
continual improvement.
Just improvement.
You just recently changed one, right?
I recently changed it to the one that I have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are super, super calculated. Like when I think back to where you started, even with OXP, even though you say it's dissolved, you were doing stuff that like major companies are doing now with a network approach, having multiple shows on one channel. So how did you parlay all of that knowledge, all of that experience into a podcast with Chris Boucher on Yahoo Canada?
So that's a good question. So I started making a little bit of noise, like maybe a couple years ago when people kind of really started to find out a little bit more about the Mike Roach podcast. And then the whole thing with Chris Boucher is that, so during the the finals run, when they're in the finals, I saw a friend of mine from back in the day in like the Eastern Conference Finals or something like that, like when we were playing Milwaukee or something. And his name is Ibrahim. He's Chris's manager. I had no idea. Yeah. I'm from Montreal. Chris is from Montreal. Ibrahim is from Montreal as well. So I see Ibrahim at the stadium and we're chopping it up because I haven't seen him in years, right? And we have a good relationship back from, we played together on the same team when we were kids in Montreal. So I see him and we're talking, and, you know, a couple years go by and I'm at the game and it was preseason. And I was like, yo, Ibrahim, what do you think about this, man? I was like, what do you think about if we started a show, like myself and Chris? Like, because what we saw was that Danny Green, when he played for the Raptors, Danny Green had a podcast called Inside the Green Room with Danny Green. I know Danny, I know his producer, and he had it with Yahoo Sports. Danny's green now, so Danny Green is gone now. So he didn't have that podcast at Yahoo Sports anymore. So I was like, all right, well, what if I get Chris Boucher to do a podcast? You know what I mean? I was like, there's no way they're going to turn down a show with a current NBA player.
Right.
Like, you typically don't turn down shows with current players, whether you're in the NFL, NHL, NBA, no matter what, right? That's fire. That's what you're looking for. So I say, what do you think about doing a show with Chris? Like, Chris is like a brutally honest guy. He likes doing it. He enjoys it. So I go home that night. I get home about 11 o'clock, write an email to Yahoo. Yahoo gets back to me maybe in about a day, maybe a day and a half. They love the idea right away. They want to do it.
Wow. So what goes into an email like that?
Or also, did you go into your blue book, or like you just hit the Google machine? Like,
nah, man, you know what I did? I went to Instagram, and I went to Instagram. I went to Yahoo Sports page, send them a message on IG. I was like, hello, Yahoo. Who's in control of your content? Who's the boss, or who's running the show there, or whatever? And they gave me a name. So I said, okay, do you have an email to go with that name? And boom, they send it to me. I get the email. I write them. I say, hello, Yahoo. You know, my name is Mike Roach. I'm a broadcast assistant for the Raptors. I have a show called the Mike Roach Podcast. I've been podcasting for a little while now. Chris Boucher, who plays for the Toronto Raptors, and myself are interested in doing a podcast, and we think you guys could be a suitable platform for us to do the podcast with. They get back to me right away. They love it. They definitely want to do it. We jump on a call. So now we're talking just like we are right now on Zoom, and we're hashing everything out. Boom, we want to do it. They want to do it. We progress. We get the contracts there. We sign the contracts. We negotiate what we need to negotiate, whether it's money, how many episodes we want to do, what kind of production we want to have. And there you go. There it is right there.
And so have you ever engaged in a negotiation like that before? Did a little bit of it feel overwhelming at all? Or did you ever feel like you were kind of, not like you were, I hate the term imposter syndrome. I don't like it, but I don't know how else to think of it. Like, you're kind of, there's no rule book, or there's no guide to how do you negotiate a media deal, or like how many episodes is a good number of episodes, or like, you know, what are the terms of an arrangement like this? Did you feel like, did you have anybody to guide you here, or was it just going off of your gut and really just talking with Ibrahim and Chris and just saying, this is what I feel like would be good, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty much, man. That's it. I had never done anything like this before. So I mean, I just went in there confident. I could already see myself in that role of doing a show like that. So, I mean, pretty much what I did was I reached out to a friend of mine. His name is Amjad, and he's the producer for Inside the Green Room with Danny Green. And I asked him a few questions, and then I kind of just used what he gave me and kind of just went on the fly with, what I thought was best. And trust me, I made a lot of mistakes in that negotiation that I learned later on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was a very good partnership. And I mean, it just worked out. Like you mentioned, like there's no real guidebook, especially when you haven't done before. You haven't done it before. You kind of just, you get the experience from doing it that time.
Right.
You make a lot of mistakes, and then you just take what you learn and move forward with what you've learned pretty much.
Yeah.
Can you share with us anything that you learned? Like, you don't have to go into details of what's in the contract, but are there any one thing that you're like, yeah, next time I'm definitely not doing that?
I mean, the only thing I would say is that you make sure that you get creative control if that's what you want, and make sure that you thoroughly go over the contract, even pay a lawyer if you have to go over it. With me, it worked out well because I had an NBA player in Chris Boucher alongside me, and Chris Boucher is with Rock Nation. And because he's with Rock Nation, it made the process a little bit easier because they had an agent and whoever else, whether it was a lawyer or whatnot, but he had an agent from Rock Nation look over that contract. And when they look over that contract, now you're seeing all these red circles and X's and lines, and we don't want this, we don't want that. Get rid of this, get rid of that, So luckily we had Chris and his team there where they kind of helped us out a little bit. Well, helped him. I was just there as well, so it helped me as well, right? Mm-hmm. So lucked out that kind of way. But honestly, the partnership with Yahoo Sports was fantastic. I had a guy, Mackenzie Liddell, was the guy who was running the ship. Amit Maan was the guy who was helped out tremendously. He is now the producer for the Raptors show for Sportsnet. And it was a great partnership, man. I can't complain about it at all. It worked out well for everyone.
Yeah. Too bad about Yahoo Sports Canada and how that that ended up shutting down shop and whatnot. But I guess that's just kind of how the times are. And I mean, media is changing. The whole industry is changing, but it seems like a common theme, whether you're talking about like the big broadcasters in Canada with Rogers, Bell, and CBC, or you're talking about, just on the web, Yahoo. There's been a lot of, so even in press like Sports Illustrated, there's been a lot of layoffs and things of that nature. So it seems as though people are consuming content in the way that you're putting it out now, like from independent creators such as yourself, or they want more things that are, on demand, bite size and whatnot. And maybe there's not as much money to go around for the traditional media as it was before. What's your take on the current state of the industry? And I guess as it relates to the path that you've chosen, versus, the opportunities that are out there for people who are just getting into the industry?
No, just like you mentioned, man, and I mentioned before, make sure you start a platform for yourself. Because as you can see, like even those guys on the top, let me give you two examples. You look at a guy like Stephen A. Smith, and then you look at a guy like Shannon Sharp, right? Those two guys are big time dogs at ESPN right now. But yet Shannon Sharp makes sure he has his Club Shay Shay going on, which is owned and operated by him. Stephen A. Smith now has the Stephen A. Smith show that he does, that he puts on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and all that kind of stuff, that is owned and operated by him. Those guys don't have to do that. But they know that just like you mentioned, all these layoffs and all that kind of stuff. Now, obviously, those guys are at the top of the game, and if people get laid off, it's not going to be them. But at the end of the day, you just don't know anymore at this point. You don't know what can happen. So even though those guys are making some big money and they're all over ESPN all the time, they still want to make sure that they have something for themselves, right? And we're in a time right now where a lot of these layoffs and things that you see happening, first of all, they're going to continue to happen because people are making some serious content right now, whether it's written, whether it's visual, whether it's audio. And it seems like a lot of these companies do not want to pay these people and pay them fairly for the work that they're actually doing. So a lot of the people that we want to hear and see, we're not going to be seeing them on these networks because they ain't getting paid anything to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of the time, that's why you see all these new networks popping up and people making their own content and finding a way to get paid because, like you mentioned before, there's only a certain amount of jobs that are going to be available in this space if you don't create one for yourself, right? Now, me creating a platform for myself now gets me into doing stuff for a Yahoo and doing stuff with a guy like Chris Boucher. But even though that company no longer exists, it still creates other opportunities elsewhere. Things that I may not have spoken about yet, or that you've heard about yet. That doesn't mean that they're not there, right? They're there in many different ways, but you got to be able to have the platform to be able to get started where people notice you. And the way I did that was just doing something for myself. But to answer your question, to me, I think we're in a very good place right now when it comes to content. The only thing I would say is I would urge patience when you're making your content. Don't expect things to go from 1 to 100 overnight, and make sure that you're continually trying to improve. And you don't always have to do things the same as everybody else. Try to find a niche, try to find a way to make things different. I think about it every day in my head. Like, I like what I'm doing right now, but eventually, and sometime soon, you're going to see some things that are going to change a little bit with myself because a lot of people are doing what I'm doing. I got to figure out how to do it better. How do I stand out? What kind of guests am I going to be speaking to? What do I want the look and feel to be like when I'm doing a show? You always got to sit down and kind of figure these things out. And sometimes somebody could have a really great idea, right, for a show, but you wait too long to launch the show and now somebody else is doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can have an idea for a show and it can sit on your mind for like a month, and it's a damn good show. And then it sits on your mind for 6 months. Then it sits on your mind for a year. Then it sits on your mind for 2 years. By the time those 2 years are up, or maybe a year, maybe 6 months, you see somebody else doing the same damn show that you had in your head. And you're like, damn, why was I sitting on this? The whole time I had this in my head. Why was I sitting on this? So what I'm trying to say is, in this industry, speed wins. Speed wins in this industry. You got to be quick. You got to be fast. You can't just sit down and hope that things are going to happen or move slowly, man, because we're in an industry where things are like quick every day. Like the Milwaukee Bucks coach, Adrian Griffin, he got fired yesterday.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Dude was 30-13. Second place in the Eastern Conference. He got canned. Now, you can't wait a week or a month to put out a podcast about that. You got to be on there same day.
Yeah.
Podcast out. Next day, podcast out. You know what I'm saying? But he's a good example of like, there ain't no time to relax. Like, you got to move.
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. Mike, I feel like I could just, I'm trying not to keep talking because I want to hear you. You got a lot of insight, man. You definitely, from just the relentless pursuit of an opportunity. And I feel like that is a lesson that could transfer from one industry to the next, whether you're an athlete who's trying to get into a college or you're a graduate trying to get an internship. That approach is one that people could adopt and apply to a number of situations. And then also the continual improvement. And I love what you're saying, like speed wins. Just if you have an idea, put it out. Like you said, put the intro on it, put the outro on it, and just ship it, because those reps are going to stack up. You could even tell by the way that you speak that you've practiced this deliberately.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I want to make one thing clear, and I want to just add this point as well. Sorry to
go ahead.
Jump in there. I want people to know that when they're doing, see how you guys are doing this show that you're doing right now. See how you have your backgrounds. You're in your room, playing background behind you. Got a playing background behind you. You see your door. That stuff doesn't matter. Okay, like, you're gonna look at over here. You'll see in my room. I mean, I have all these pictures. Like, there's me, Thaddeus Young, Danny Green is up there. I got pictures of. And I've been doing this for like a long time now. So I've done stuff like this. Having stuff like this in the background, none of that matters.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero. Nothing has to look pretty. Nothing has to look fancy. None of that. Okay. You don't have to have all these over time, if you want to improve and you want your microphones and all that kind of stuff, yeah, you could have them. I have all my stuff for my shows, like I got my tablets hooked up and all that kind of stuff. You don't need any of that stuff. Over time, that can come, because I've been doing it for a while. Only thing that matters is your content. People only care about what you say. They don't give a damn about all this crap in the back. They don't care if I have a sign that says the Mike Roach Podcast on there. They don't care if I have pictures up there. Nobody cares about that stuff. I do it because I like it. I want to look polished. I've been doing this for a while. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Everything that matters is going to be the discussion that you're having, the content, everything that you're talking about. Who are you helping besides yourself? What are people going to get out of this conversation that we're having right now? That's what they care about. You don't need all this stuff in the back to do that. All it takes is what we're talking about now. That's all it takes.
Man. And so there's just so much to reach in and just grab from this episode. I think this has been fun, man. And definitely a lot of lessons to take out of this, and a lot of clips that I'm already thinking about. He's talking about market it. If you guys are listening to this right now, I guarantee that you probably already saw a clip from this on social media. If not, you got to follow and follow along with Mike Roach as well. But we'll get to that in a second. Mike, before we wrap this up, we got one question for you. And this is something that is kind of a lighthearted question that we like to ask everybody. But you, especially as somebody who's been in such close proximity to some of the greatest athletes that have ever graced the 416, who are your 3 favorite athletes of all time? Any sport, any era, but just your 3 favorites.
Oh, that's a good question. 3 favorite athletes of all time. Okay. Of any sport.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting stuff. Wow.
How heavy is that? That's heavy, right?
Yeah. Okay. So for the first one, I'd probably have to say, well, I have 2 for sure. I'm thinking about the third one. So let me give you the first 2. First one, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, for sure. Like, there no ifs, and or buts about that. Number 2, Kobe Bryant. No if, and, or buts. Like Kobe Bryant, hands down. Right? If I had to pick a third, wow. You see, it's a tough question because you can't just say anyone if you're saying to pick 3, right?
Because picking one seems unfair because we love so many sports and so many stories. But 3 is not that much easier.
No, it's not, man, because there's so many. There's so many, you know. So can we combine athletes and entertainment together?
Perfect.
The Rock.
Oh, that's a good one.
Well, he did spend one training camp with the Calgary Stampeders. So he does qualify. And
he's a WWE athlete. Come on, that is athletic.
To be fair, you absolutely have to be an athlete to do what they do. Yeah. So yeah, he's up there, man. He's amazing. Love that guy.
Yeah.
Talk about a mogul, right?
Yeah. You see what he just recently did? That's a whole other podcast, but that was a big move. Signing as a board member with I forget what the partnership company is that controls the WWE and the new league UFC. That he has.
Yeah.
But
with the UFC
combined, right? Yeah. He got the rights to The Rock. So he owns the rights to The Rock. Now, I didn't know he didn't own the rights before. But through this partnership, he has the rights to The Rock. So that's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and just in time for Raw to do that $5 billion 10-year deal with Netflix to have wrestling going
crazy.
Global. Man.
Yeah.
Well, look,
it's amazing.
I guess we're going to have to run it back for another episode another time and just talk about recent news. But Mike Roach, it's been absolutely phenomenal chatting with you. Your story is inspirational, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Just from the convo, I feel like you got something cooking that we need to stay in tune for. So tell everybody who listen where they can catch up with you and they can follow along with the rest of what you're building.
You can get me on Instagram at Mike Roach 7. I'm on X. I'm more of a retweeter than an actual tweeter. At Mike Roach 23 on there. But yeah, man, I mean, you can find me on Apple Podcasts, on Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, the Mike Roach Podcast. And you want to watch any episodes of Hustle Play, myself and Chris Boucher, you can find that on YouTube. And I appreciate you, man. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate you guys having me on your show, man. It's an honor to be on here with you guys. I mentioned before we started recording, I know you guys have been doing your thing for a little bit, and I know I've known about your podcast for a little bit now because I mentioned a good friend of mine, Brandon Graham, who's a huge football guy.
Yeah.
Put me on your podcast a little while ago.
Yeah. So this is our second life of our podcast because we initially started one in 2017. And it's funny when you mentioned you can have an idea and you sit on it. And then you sit on it and then you watch somebody else do it and you're like, dang, I had that idea. And it was almost one of those kinds of things because we did it in 17 to 19. Then we had a hiatus and then we saw that the world was asking for what we had to offer. So it's really a lot of the things you were saying were hitting close to home. And so I appreciate it. It was like when you were in that room shouting at the ceiling, like, why are we doing this if it's not going to yield any fruit? And then you came down and reassured us, like, don't worry, y'all are going in the right direction. So
it's funny you say that too, because before I even get out of here, one thing that I realized early was that part of the reason I think I've been at least somewhat successful doing this is because it's never been about numbers for me, right? Like a lot of people, they think this is all about Instagram and like TikTok followers and all this crap. I have like 18 point something thousand followers on Instagram or something like that. That's all spam. I don't even know who these people are. Like, I don't even know how I got these many followers. Like one day I just woke up and I just like 100, 200,000 follows in a day. I'm like, bro, how much of this is spam? What is going on here? I don't even know who these damn people are. know what I mean? But the one thing I understood was that quality over quantity when it comes to people listening to your show. Do not look at your numbers and who's following you. None of that matters. Like, you can have 100,000 followers, 200,000 followers. Some people have 500,000 followers. It means absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing. What matters is who's listening to you, not how many people are listening to you. Who's listening to you? Okay? I can have 100,000 people listening to me, and none of those 100,000 people can do anything for me. Or I can have 8 listening to me, and one of them's a big-time producer who could provide an opportunity. Okay? That's the way that I thought about it, and that's the way I'm always going to think about it. Because if I have 4 people listening to me, well, I'm going to work my ass off to make sure that those 4 people get a damn good show. Or those 3 or those 2 people listening to me get a damn good show. Because you don't know who those 2 people are. And you don't know who those 2 people are going to turn out to be.